Hey, before we start this podcast, I want to let you know that Kaki is sponsoring this video. Now, if you don't know what Kaki is a fantastic website where you can buy Thomas products that won't get you price gouged out of your mind. It's really good. I like it a lot. They have some really cheap items. And when I say cheap, I don't mean like, oh, it's poor quality. I mean like price-wise, French kiss. It is so good. They got everything from Play Rail to Erdl, Take Along, Wooden Railway. Now the cheap prices are great, but if you want to save even more money, you can use code PDP10 to save an extra 10% off your first order. And the money that you save using the code goes to supporting me as a creator, so thank you very much if you do that. Even if you don't want to use the code though, it is a fantastic website and I definitely recommend. Anyways, that's all I gotta say. Thank you Kaki for sponsoring the show. Link in the description. Now, on to the main event. Hello and welcome to the Analyzation Express, the show where I read and review a variety of Thomas content that I wouldn't be able to tackle in my normal videos. Today, I have something that's a little bit different from the norm. Now, usually when we take a look at a story on this show, it's something that's either completely original or something that is in the style of the Railway series. And this is something that is indeed based off of another piece of media, but not quite in the same way. To be specific, today we're looking at Thomas and the Great War. Now this is a story that was based off of The Adventures of Thomas, which was a cancelled movie centered in World War II that was going to be directed by Shane Acker. Now I don't know a whole lot about this movie, although I am aware that it was trying to follow in the same steps as Magic Railroad, in that it didn't really focus on Thomas a whole lot. Thomas was kind of just like a constant force in there. As usual, I'm going into this completely blind, not knowing anything about it, not knowing what the writing is like. The writer for this is Jake that's a name. Jake Rutiglino, I think is the name of the author. I'm completely unfamiliar with any of his work, although he has certainly written quite a few stories. He's got some Big Hero 6 stuff, some Kingdom Hearts meets Zootopia, as well as something that looks like it's from Beauty and the Beast, which is interesting. Maybe I'll cover that in a future episode. For now, let's stick to what we know. This was last updated in 2014, so this is probably the oldest story that we're going to be looking at. Let's dive in with Chapter 1, the prologue. We're starting off with a difficult name right off the bat. Gavrilo Philip, I'm just gonna call him Gav. Gav, it's not even Philip, oh my gosh, it's like Princip. I'm gonna say Gav Princip. Gav Princip, a Bosnian nationalist working for the Black Hand, was a major supporter for the freedom of Serbia in the German Empire. His garnered ideologies led to the violent assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and his wife at Sarajevo on June 28th, 1914. Already we're getting into history that I don't know the first thing about. A month later, the World War followed. The World War. The Great War, some called it. It was the best war, if we're being perfectly honest. I mean, like, you hear about wars all the time. You got the American-Spanish War, you've got the War of 1812, but when you have a war that's literally called the Great War, I mean, come on, it has to be at least like A-tier war. In the year following the assassination, the London, Brighton, and South Coast Railway scrapped the employments of their E1 tank engines. They were soon replaced with LB Brighton's latest models for heavier shunting duties called the E2. The 5-year-old son of one of these employees named Wilbert, whose father went away to fight against the Austro-Hungarian Empire, had curiously, in a naive way, befriended one of these new engines. His name was Thomas, and his crew had been immediately selected for the Northwestern Railway, run by Sir Topham Hatt on the island of Sodor, which was located on the Wainy Channel east of the Isle of Man. That entire paragraph is 2 run-on sentences, geez. In the absence of his mother, who was a stay-at-home housewife, Wilbert's curiosity had led him to the island by climbing on board Thomas's cab when he was taken care of by the engine and his driver and fireman. Oh my gosh, just when you're writing a story, I understand that there's this need to try to cram in as much stuff as possible, and I appreciate that, but you have to remember that when you're writing lore for something, you can't just keep adding on to a sentence. Like, in the absence of his mother, who was a stay-at-home housewife, Wilbert's curiosity led him to the island, period. He had climbed aboard Thomas's cab where he was taken care of by the engine and his driver and fireman. right there, that's another run-on sentence you could say was taken care of by his driver and fireman. Or alternatively, was taken care of by the engine, his driver, and fireman, period. When you're writing, please avoid run-on sentences because it gets tiring to read after a while. During his stay at the port terminal in Vickerstown, Wilbert made friends with another engine from the Furness Railway. He called himself Edward, no commas at all, and proved to be a very kind engine who felt sorry for Wilbert when he missed his war-gone father. "Why are you crying?" asked Edward. "I haven't seen father," capital F father, I guess that's right, "in a long time," came the reply. Thomas and Edward thought for some time on how to return the child back to... Wait, you just let a child on board the train? Why didn't you stop? Why did he climb on board the train? How did he hide away from the crew? Why did the crew not just reverse back down the line? Why didn't they stop and say, "Get off the train, bucko"? So many questions, and it's only the first chapter. They wanted... Okay, so Thomas and Edward, they want to return him back to his family before enemy forces could even think about invading the island, as they were already bombing England via Zeppelins. But it wasn't long before he remembered that his father was in an Allied camp that was not too far from York, and with the unexpected help of Sir Topham Hatt, sent the word of his son's whereabouts in Morse code. Again, like, I feel like we're just summarizing an entire plot here. Traveling amongst the sea-faring battles between the British and German navies on an unused battleship, Wilbert and his father were soon reunited. Like, what the heck? Why are we suddenly... Like, the whole plot of the story is gone. But first, he had to say goodbye to Thomas and everything for the friendship, which we didn't really get to see. "Will I see you again?" asked Wilbert. Thomas smiled and said, "If you ever wish to return to Sodor, it's only a whistle away." But like most boys and their childhood escapades, Wilbert soon forgot everything as he grew up over the next 30 years. It was just a one and done, talking steam engines in one ear and out the other. Everything he knew about Thomas, Sodor, and their friendship had become a faded memory. World War I ended with the I can't even begin with something on November 11th in 1918, a victory for the Allies. Germany, ruined by defeat, consolated in a national party that compared directly to communist rule in Moscow. In 1933, an Austrian named Adolf Hitler promised to avenge the downfall by becoming Führer of his own Germany, a country ruled by hate and National Socialism. The rest of the story, however, became not very fun for one of its enemies. By 1914, the United Kingdom was fighting another war, a Second World War. An even greater war, some might say. London, England was home to a boy named Christopher. That's technically correct, but that London, England just looks wrong there. He was about 13 years old with dark hair and a pluck of confidence in his personality. For it was no wonder that he liked trains. Especially when he would watch the express trains pull into King's Cross and the tank engines shunting trucks in the yard. However, some of his schoolmates and teachers thought he was going round the bend with his obsession that would have made him a railway enthusiast. Some would tease him about it and make engine noises that they thought would make him feel comfortable. Wait a sec, so they would tease him about it and make engine noises to make him feel comfortable? Do you mean uncomfortable? But Christopher thought they were being rude and would turn them away. Wait, so they would tease him about it, but then the people who were teasing him made engine noises because they thought that would make him feel comfortable, which is like 1,000 leaps in logic that I can't even begin to get into. And Christopher thought they were being rude and would turn them away. Okay. He also liked to draw steam engines and carriages down to the last detail he could find. Just down to the last detail would have been fine. Some of them were dismissed as being crude, and some of them were appreciated as experimental and almost realistic as Albert Speer of German architect. There's too much information and detail that doesn't need to be here, and then the information that needed to be here in the prologue with all the stuff, the kid jumping on the train, where was that? One day at the school he had gone to, his teacher, a woman of French descent, I don't know why that's important, gave a positive comment on his latest work of a ALNER J50, not an LNER J50, a one. "Is that a tank engine?" she asked. "Yes," Christopher replied. "It's hard to believe you can ever draw so good," the teacher replied. Dick teacher. "It's more than that," explained Christopher. "I love railways. There's nothing to do with your ability to draw, my guy." The words brought an extra amount of silence and stares from the rest of his peers. "Here we go again," one of them called out. Christopher was dismayed. He felt like such a good why did they say here we go again? He felt like such a good artist, but he had to admit that not everyone in his class was a railway enthusiast. Oh, this is so disjointed. And so, feeling hurt, he left the school 2 hours early before the final bell rang. What a bad boy. So Christopher sat sideways on the wall by the railway track until all of the students had gone home. As he watched the trains leaving and departing at King's Cross Station, just say leaving King's Cross. Wait, where is he right now? He's at the school, but he's at King's Cross Station. What? He thought to himself. End of sentence. I wouldn't mind being an engine. Careful what you wish for, bucko. I can think of a few fan-made projects that would really make you not want to be an engine. I wouldn't mind being an engine. No feeling lonesome, no kids making you look bad, and no adults to make you look as though you were strange. Your teacher said that she liked your work. She said you did good train thing. Really, it's the teacher's fault for not stepping in and being a fucking teacher. Indeed, Christopher was a little strange. So strange, he would consider himself as a male counterpart to Alice from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Again, you just had to say Alice in Wonderland, you didn't have to specify both. But given his age, he wasn't as naive like many other boys during this time of war, although he wanted to see more of the world beyond his horizons of the city torn by Nazi Germany, the most ruthless government in creation of all political matters. Again, run-on sentence, disjointed. When he saw his peers leaving the school from across the road, I thought his peers already left. Christopher knew that it was his turn to go home as well. He lived in Stanley Crescent with his parents Margaret and Wilbert. Not on Stanley Crescent with his parents Margaret and Wilbert, in Stanley Crescent. Now 33 years into adulthood. Not to mention a place in the armed forces as a navigator is not a detail that needed to be there. Like several, Wilbert and Christopher had a close relationship as father and son, watching trains together, playing chess, racing each other through the park, and playing cricket matches until the invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939 caused it all to go downhill. They were playing cricket right up until the invasion of Poland. The second they marched in there, Wilbert was like, "Ike, kiddo, time to go." And then there was no more chess, no more trains, and no more racing. His leave for battle turned Christopher into a bitter boy, and his innocent world of childhood had shattered into a mature realm of becoming a preteen. I'm gonna say that one again. His leave for battle turned Christopher into a bitter boy. That's Wilbert's leave for battle. It's not specified, but whatever. Turned him into a bitter boy, comma, and his innocent world of childhood had shattered into the mature realm of becoming a preteen. I'm just gonna put it out there. When I was a preteen, I was not even remotely mature. In fact, I was probably even more immature. Christopher's mother, Margaret, was no help either. Why did you put a comma? It's written like Christopher's mother, comma, Margaret, no comma, was no help either. There should be a comma there. Like his grandmother, she too was a stay-at-home who only left the house for volunteer work and to help the war effort by providing charity to the wounded, since she was much too light-hearted for work with the other woman who provided airplane parts for the RAF. Fortunately, her husband, who often came home for visits and Christmas holidays over the last 3 years, was not one of them. One of who? We'll never know. He had been attacked before, but only managed to get out with a few cuts and bruises. I feel like that is a sentence that I see repeated over and over and over again. A lot of it in Victor Tanzig stuff where it's like, oh, only a few cuts and bruises. As soon as Christopher returned to the family townhouse near Stanley Crescent, I can't believe you dox him like that, he put down his notebook and removed his cap and jacket. He was going to show Margaret his picture of the J-50. You know, he never said that why Margaret was no help. Like, she's a stay-at-home mother, and she only leaves the elves to do, but like, he hasn't really said anything about, like, oh, does she just not care about him? Like, I don't understand. "Mother, what do you think of this picture?" "It looks nice," said Margaret, as all mothers do, "like a drawing done by your father when he was a child." At that moment, Wilbert came in. Convenient. It's like he heard his name. His wife greeted him with a sad smile. Christopher gave him a glare. He hated to think that his father was treating him like he was invisible because he hardly had any time for Christopher thanks to the war. "We're only fighting a war here, kiddo." "Speaking of drawings," explained Wilbert, I always seem to draw some railway that existed in my mind when I was much younger than you, Christopher, but I never can remember that far. Wait, where did he come in from? At that moment, Wilbert came in. How did he hear this? How did he hear the thing to say, speaking of drawings? You probably don't even remember what it was like to be my age, Christopher mumbled angrily. Like, no comma between mumbled and angrily. Wilbert tried to cheer his son up. How can I fight in a war without your support? He asked. Sometimes you have to accept that I can't be here all the time like in the times before the war happened. He checked his pocket watch. A memoir from... A memoir? That can't be a memoir. Yeah, memoir is not the right word there. I'm sorry. Anyway, it was a thing from Christopher's grandfather. Anyways, I should get going. I have to leave for York. Right now? Asked Margaret. You just quote-unquote came in. What do you mean you have to leave for York? If you know where to find me, answered Wilbert, I'll be right outside of York. What? If you know where to find me, answered... You mean if you need to find me? Reluctantly, Christopher gave his father a great big hug. Christopher did not want him to leave, and secretly, so did Wilbert. You're my whole world, Christopher whispered in his ear. I feel like that should have been Wilbert whispering that. After Wilbert left the house around 9 p.m. Well, what time is it? You're telling me that it was 9 p.m. when your boy Christopher came home? Christopher watched him go to the military lorry from his room and waved goodbye. Then he looked up at the night sky from his attic. He went up to the attic from his room to look up at the night sky. Why he didn't just look out the window from his room? I don't know. Wondering about his future. If a postman came to the house saying that Wilbert had been killed in action, he would never feel that warm love again. He didn't feel warm love to begin with. He's a bitter, angry kid. The story is said to be 3 hours long, and we're already on chapter 3, Evacuation. Poor Christopher had become a shadow of his former self ever since the day his father had been drafted into the army. I thought he already was in the army. He didn't feel pleased when he came back on the Christmas of the year he left amongst the other visit. What? On that very midnight his father left again. He had an uncomfortable sleep and woke up the next morning feeling lonely. Just then, he heard the doorbell ring, and with newfound happiness, he rushed downstairs to answer it, hoping it would be father deciding to stay with him once and for all. But when Margaret answered the door before he could, his heart melted when he found it was not father, but a general from the Home Guard with an important message. Your son is due on the morning train, Mum, he said, and left. 6 minutes later, Christopher had taken off his nightgown and switched into his more casual outfit, consisting of a white polo shirt, a black blazer, dark tan shorts with matching knee socks, and chocolate brown shoes. His mother was combing his hair as he looked straight into the vanity mirror with a nasty scowl on his lips like the stubborn child he was. You look upset, said his mother. Is it about your father? What the fuck do you think, Mom? You ever talk to me about my dad? You're okay with dad, he just goes off and you never want to comfort me? Fucking lady. I can't leave you as well, murmured Christopher. We only have half an hour before the train leaves, Margaret assured him. But if you don't relax, then no breakfast for you. I'd rather stay, said Christopher. It's not like there have been many bombings recently since 2 years ago. Okay, I explained before why I don't like detail like this, where it's like they recently, and then you could just end it there, but then they add more stuff. The reason I don't like that is because you're adding on extra information to this. Not only that doesn't need to be there, but is in a place where it just feels weird to read. So like, it's not like there have been many bombings recently since 2 years ago. You could say there hasn't been any bombings in the last 2 years, but like, when you say it's not like there have been many bombings recently since 2 years ago, it just sounds broken. And he was right. Thank you, story. The Blitz and the Battle of Britain had ended 2 years before, but the concern for the safety of London's children and the other battles going on between Britain and Germany were still occurring. Again, just too much stuff, not enough sentences. The last raid was about a month ago, argued Margaret. But remember, Christopher, we will always be here for you, in spirit. When she left the room, Christopher plopped down on the bed and began to pack his sack with some clothes, a few rations, and his notebook. Of all the places I have to go to, he said to himself out loud, I have to go to the countryside. Home is everything to me, and without it, I'd prefer to be a war orphan. Christopher, you've got to stop being so edgy, jeez. So Christopher and Margaret had a quiet breakfast of toast and marmalade, and went to King's Cross, where they said their goodbyes before the train to Liverpool departed at 8 o'clock. The journey took about 2 hours, and the engine pulling the train took almost 20 minutes for it to get started after stopping at Watford Junction to let a slow goods train carrying gunpowder vans pass by. The train was also full with Jewish refugees, some from Germany, some English, and some of them were French and Czechoslovakian. But Christopher knew that he was traveling on a trainload of strangers, and he remained silent for the rest of the journey. But he didn't say anything to begin with. In fact, it was the first time in his life he did not acknowledge the joy of having a ride on his favorite mode of transportation. The train pulled into Liverpool Lime Street Station. Liverpool Lime Street Station? Also no capital on station? Okay. The other children were just about to get off while Christopher stayed behind in his compartment. He took no notice of the guard calling, "All out for Liverpool!" He just continued to stare out the window, looking feverishly at all of the other Jewish refugees being called up in a single straight line. "How can they expect me to fit in with all these strangers?" he said to himself. Well, technically, you're a stranger too. Christopher wasn't anti-Semitic, which is good, because if he was, I don't think I'd be able to read this story. But he felt that Jewish people were strange in their own little community of culture and religion. Then he darted his eyes towards Waterloo's Crosby Beach in the distance. Waterloo? I thought we were at Lime Street, Liverpool. Maybe that's a geography thing that I don't know. If he could find a boat, he would have two options: go home or have a little adventure by himself, floating through the vast ocean. Chris, you're gonna freaking die. "What's the harm in running away?" asked Chris. Jeez, "where is your mother?" as he picked up his sack and slipped quietly out of his compartment. The guard was with the supervisor on the platform by the time Christopher left the station. He was showing her the passenger list. "You were supposed to have 31 children, and we've counted 30, exclaimed the guard. "One is missing." But the supervisor took little concern of this. "Fuck 'em," said the supervisor. "No, that's just me." "We really must be leaving," she said. "I can leave now or stay until tea time if you wait, stay until tea time? You've got to look for this other child." After the young refugees had left, Christopher had ran all the way across the other side of the town, past Bootle, and sat down to rest on the edge of the Merseyside coastline, away from all the cars, buses, and loud citizens, and onto the white sand of Crosby Beach. "What the... I'll come back later when it's all over," said Chris as he settled down on the ground. Crosby Beach was a bit of a windy place with only a few people and a lot of ships. And if an enemy ship were to invade by taking the left flank, the chances of surrender would be much easier, if not futile. Wait, what? What are you saying here? What's the point of that? Why? Who's telling me this? Should they win the war? As he took in the soft breeze, Christopher looked for a boat, hoping to find one that had been abandoned by its owner, as to not be arrested for pilfering someone else's boat. You know, at least he's following the law. Okay, if you steal abandoned property, are you really stealing property? Finders keepers, losers weepers, am I right? At last he saw a little old collapsible boat with an oar that needed some paint, looking as though it had been run aground by a larger ship. Collapsible boat? That's the one, thought Christopher. He looked into it. Empty. It doesn't look like it was owned by anyone else. I mean, I'm sure it was, otherwise how would it be there? He threw his sack into the boat and, pushing hard, managed to bring it out into the ocean. As his feet touched the cold water, Christopher climbed into the boat and pushed it further away from the beach using the oar. Now, he was miles south of Cumbria. I'm sorry to all the Cumbrian citizens watching this, but gosh dang it. How did he get suddenly miles out into the ocean, deciding which way to go? No thanks to his lack of a compass. I don't think a compass is going to help you here, bucko. If I go north, I might find solace in another region, thought Christopher. If you don't starve to death first, said me. Or if I go south, I'll be able to go home. Either way, I'll get to a place of solitude. It may not be the same without father. What about your mom? But I can still be independent before I'm a grown-up. Christopher was so confident of making his own journey by boat, he hardly realized that Liverpool Bay had become an anthill in the distance, and the ocean breeze was blowing him northward, picking up the pace as he drifted off into the Irish Sea. Christopher's gonna fucking die. When Christopher realized what had happened, he noticed that the bay was far behind, with nothing ahead of him but the deep blue sea on a lovely afternoon. At least it's a lovely afternoon. You know, it'd be really bad if it was like stormy or there was snow or some other kind of weather event. You know, at least it is a beautiful day. He can't drink any of the water and he's probably going to die of dehydration, if not starvation. But you know, at least he's having a nice time. Now what am I supposed to do? Fumed Christopher, crossing his arms in frustration. I'm just saying, bucko, you should have thought a little farther ahead. You can't just take a boat and go out into the water with no plan. He suddenly remembered the oar. You just remembered the oar. You've used the oar to paddle out. How did you get out into the middle of buttfuck nowhere? The breeze did not blow you miles out into the water. He suddenly remembered the oar and used it to paddle the boat like a canoe with a few small strokes before they became big ones, traveling in the direction of the wind. If the wind takes me places, Christopher thought, then maybe I can find a place of solitude. Christopher, you are making a dangerous gamble. I'm just saying. 3 hours passed. Christopher's boat was sailing into the sunset, still heading north as he began to worry about his decision of running away. He didn't know which way was north or south, so he stopped rowing and put the oar underneath the wooden seats used for other occupants. I'm lost, he whispered. Whatever will I do? Christopher didn't know which way was the way back to Liverpool Bay. That rhymes. But it didn't matter if he wanted to be fit in with the young Jews. Ooh. Okay, he wanted to find a place. He wanted to find land as quick as possible. A passing ocean liner did not even bother to rescue him, for the captain's binoculars were too far away from the boy's field of vision. Huh? That evening, the sun had set upon the Irish Sea, and nighttime fell with thousands of stars gleaming overhead in a cosmic pattern. Christopher had been in the boat all day, for he had been thirsty and was careful not to drink too much of the salt water, so he took a handful every half of an hour until the first star came into the sky. Exhausted, Christopher crawled under the wooden seats and hugged his sack like a teddy bear. He was miserable and the wind was blowing harder than ever, turning the water into waves that rocked the boat further and further into the north. Yesterday, everything was so normal, moaned Christopher, and now here I am, lost at sea with no compass, no latitude or longitude. How does he know what latitude and longitude are? And no father to keep me company. Yeah, fuck mom. Also, father is not capitalized here despite it being capitalized before. With a sigh and a whimper while trying to resist the tide knocking his body all over the boat, Christopher went silently into a dreamless sleep, wishing that his journey would end and he would be back home in London where he belonged with his father. Then, without waiting, nothing, not even a bloody war, would ever come between him and his father again. Oh, baby, that was chapter 3. You know, I said I'm gonna cut this author a lot of slack because I do think that when this was written, it was by someone who was a lot younger, but oh my gosh, there is a lot of stuff going on here that just, there's the ingredients for something really good, but it's just not put together properly. The story is written in what I would call summary format, where you're just seeing the highlights of the story as they unfold rather than the story itself from the point of view of Christopher or from the point of view of Wilbert or from anyone. And if I'm going to be completely honest, it kind of makes the story a lot less engaging because there's these big walls of text and there's very little dialogue going on here. Honestly, I don't hate the concept of Thomas in World War II. I mean, Stories of War by Victor Tanzik, really good. This, on the other hand, just doesn't do it for me, and the prologue especially doesn't do it for me because it's just summarizing an entire story in a few hundred words, and it just feels kind of half-baked, and it doesn't really get me in the mood for what is supposed to be a fairly grand excursion. We haven't even gotten to the Thomas stuff yet, but I think I'm okay for stopping here for now. In fact, I'm going to spin this one into a part 2 just so that we can have some Thomas stuff, because I know that's what everyone came for, and we had all the setup in this episode. So next time, we're going to see what Christopher's adventures on the island of Sodor are like, what crazy shenanigans he gets into, provided he doesn't literally die on this voyage of his. With that being said, I want to say thank you for watching, thank you to Kaki for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.